So I might start by getting you both to think about your time, and when you look back over your leadership career, can you remember the moment that inclusion became important to you? What was that moment or the situation? If you can share a bit about that with us. Let's start with you, David.
Gee, that's a tough question. Do you know, I think I'd like to start by saying that for almost all of my life, and certainly all of my professional career, I never really felt excluded. And there's not a great deal of surprise about that, because I'm white, Anglo-Saxon, a male in a male-dominated organisation like a military, particularly an army. And you learn as you go through school and life techniques for being included. Sometimes that can be a really powerful thing. It shapes you to have the right values in life, and the army gave me an enormous head start in that regard, because there's a lot of focus on ethical leadership as part of the army family. But it can also shape you to accommodating exclusion. So you actually you're part of the in crowd that by consciously pushing others away. Now, it sounds, in my case, probably worse than actually occurred. I don't think I was a particularly exclusive person growing up in the army, but I absolutely now realise that I saw the world in a very particular way. I just assumed that everybody of worth, of value, was included in the group that I was included in. Now, I have a very different view about that now. I see that there are really questionable criteria on which people make decisions about inclusion and exclusion, and without doubt, probably unconsciously, maybe at times consciously, I was part of the excluding group.
Right.
And so, it's a long and a different answer to perhaps the question asked for, but I still feel included because I'm still white and Anglo-Saxon and male, and that gives you a big head start in this country.
So a beneficiary of the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is interesting, and that's nice transparency and authenticity straight up. So thank you for that, David. Di, I know your answer to this one is not going to be the same as David's. Can you share with us the moment that inclusion became important to you and what that trigger was? Tell us a bit about that story.
So I'll have a little background. Like you, I'm Caucasian, but I'm female and going through my natural affinity is maths and science. So I felt quite different to the mob from certainly early high school. Right through university, I hung out with the engineers. I felt quite different, and I ended up in computer science and ended up at Apple. So the story I want to share with you today is interesting. I'm not sure it would happen today, but the background behind it may well still happen. And one of the things that worries me is at least exclusion was fairly out in the open 20 years ago. People just did it. So let me share with you. Once a year, Apple took a group of people on a sales conference, and it was always a wonderful event, normally a week in Hawaii at a top hotel with a whole variety of technology presentations. To get included on that group was really, really special. And it was mainly the salespeople. So I was over there, and I'd been to sessions all day, and I was enjoying a drink, sitting with the guy who was head of our Western Australian branch, and we were talking about different sales techniques and how he could maybe improve his sales results because they weren't always that great. And we were having a really, really good conversation. He was a lovely guy, and we were just sitting there on one of the lounges you have in these beautiful 5-star hotels, and our CEO walked up. He totally ignored me. He said, John, we're going to Platinum Club, you need to come. The Platinum Club is a strip joint in Honolulu, and off went the CEO. I was not even acknowledged as existing. There wasn't any, sorry Di, maybe, this really isn't appropriate for you. It was just as if I were not there. John looked at me and he was in a very difficult situation. And I know it's difficult for men to stand up. And he said to me, Di, really, I've got to go because otherwise my job will be on the line. I said, John, I know. Go, have a lovely evening. He said, I'd rather sit with you and have a drink. I don't really go for strip shows. But off they went with all the other male salespeople, and there was only one other female salesperson. Off they went to the strip joint and was not seen for the rest of the night. And to me, to be seen to be totally transparent, invisible, and not even the courtesy of saying, Di, of course you'd be welcome, but I don't know that you'd really like it, it's a strip show, was just to me was an amazing thing to happen. And it was typical. I don't say that it was any worse than a lot of the other things that went in the IT industry at that time. I think it was quite typical 20 years ago. And as I say, it was out in the open 20 years ago. Similar things still happen in this country, in workplaces where the guys are invited out or an included group is invited out and other people are excluded. And it may be gender, it may be cultural diversity, it may be disability, but now it's done a lot more subtly and subversively. But yet, it's still really hard for people to stand up and say, you know what, we should include so-and-so, or we should go somewhere that these people can join us. And I think Australia has still got a long way to go on that journey.
Thanks, Di. And I know you started your answer by saying, I don't know if these things happen in this room, and I did have a look out to the audience, and from a couple of the smirks on the faces and the rolling of the eyes, I think that it still does happen in some cases, in some places, which is unfortunate. But the reason that we're here today talking about inclusive leadership,